Well, this is going to be the last time I do this particular study. And I thank Merle for his introduction to it, because it was almost like as if he was reading my notes in one sense. I was doing some reading and some things on, of all things, y'all might laugh at me, but I got fascinated with fatty liver. Fatty liver. As you may know, the liver is the most important organ in your body. It runs everything. There's nothing that it doesn't take care of. But it's in real trouble right now. It's in trouble. It's an epidemic across the country. In 1970, I understand that it was unheard of from somebody having if they had a fatty liver, it was alcohol that caused the fatty liver. Now, there is such a thing as non-alcoholic fatty liver. Now, they've called it a new name, and I haven't been able to figure out exactly how to pronounce that name, so I'll let it go. But they said it was unheard of in children as low as 7, 8 years old, but now they've even had children that have had liver transplants because of fatty liver at 6 years old, because of the fatty liver. And now anytime I hear something like that, there's something going on in me that will chase that rabbit all the way till I can't find it anymore. But what I have read is that it all started with soft drinks is the main thing that starts it. Because the liver processes two things, high fructose corn syrup and alcohol. That's the only place that it's processed. And as soon as you drink a lot of sugar and soft drink, that goes straight to the liver and eventually becomes fat in the liver. And when that goes down the drain, your metabolic syndrome starts in. And I think I showed you the list of diseases the other day that causes it. And I'm not worried about all of the rest of them. I mean, there's a lot of them, cancer, all kinds of stuff. But the two that I'm most concerned about is Alzheimer's and dementia. Those are the ones. I told Sharon the other day on the way home from somewhere, I said, my goal is to make it to 80. And she said, well, that's not going to be hard. You only got 9 more months to make that.
That's a reasonable expectation.
What?
That's a reasonable goal.
Yeah. So then I said, after I do that, my goal is to make it to 90. And then after I make it to 90, my next goal is to make it to 100. And she said, so what do you want to do? Live long enough to have somebody change your diaper? And I said, no, as long as I'm in my right mind. She said, well, you could give up on that goal.
That ship has sailed.
So, but at any rate, so I kept going on and on about it. And one of the things that I looked at is something similar to what I don't know why I got a friend named Merle, is mental health. Because mental health affects your whole body. There's a verse in the Bible, as you know, that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Now there's several books written at the turn of the century, as a man thinketh, so is he. Now that, what he wrote in that book is very, very good, but he left out that last phrase, as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. And so there is the relationship, and I assume this is common knowledge to everybody, between how you think, your spiritual health, and your mental health. They're all interconnected tightly. As you probably read the story of people in the military, the way they have their attitude is, their depression or whatever else, will largely determine whether or not they get sick with a cold or the flu or whatever else. That controls mentally, physically, how they get along. Now, years ago, I was trying to think of all the illustrations that I could use on this, and I remember something years ago, after I'd surrendered to the ministry. I was interested in churches and things. I even watched Bishop Sheen on the Catholic Hour to see, trying to figure out what they believed. Well, I was watching, of all things, the Today Show one time, and they had all these faith healers got started up around in the late 60s, early 70s, these faith healers, Catherine Kuhlman and all these other folks. And so they had some doctors on to analyze how they were working. How did these faith healers cure these people? And did they cure them? Or was it just mind over matter type thing? And the doctor said, well, how you think is going to determine whether or not how sick you may or may not be. But he made the comment that I've never forgotten. He said, he's a medical doctor there somewhere in New York. He said, if we could get people cured of guilt, we could empty half the hospitals tomorrow. If we could just get rid of guilt, we could get rid of half the people in the hospital, could go home in a very short period of time, if we could get rid of guilt. And you've probably heard all the stories about the Indian. Maybe you've heard this story, maybe you haven't. But your physical, mental aspect will affect how the lie detector works. But the Indians discovered something else. How they would determine if somebody was lying, they would take a hot knife and have them stick their tongue out and put that hot knife on their tongue. And if it burned them, they were lying. And and if it didn't burn them, they were telling the truth. Now, what they discovered is that if you're lying and you tell a lie, your mouth dries out. And so, if you're telling the truth, you've got still liquid all over your tongue. And when they touch that hot knife, all you got is, it sizzles, but it doesn't actually burn you. And so that's how they had a way of testing. I think if I was doing it, I'd get so nervous, I'd drink me a gallon of water just before it ever happened. But that's how they determined whether or not somebody was telling the truth or not. Now, I have no proof of whether or not that's a legend or somebody made that up in the sermon illustration, like I just did. But anyway, they said that was the way. But there is something more true in the Old Testament, in Deuteronomy. If a woman was accused of committing adultery, what they would do is that they would make her swear, do all kinds of stuff. And then they would pick up some dirt off the floor where they sacrificed the animal. And they'd mix it with water and they'd make her drink it. If you're suspicious of where that's found, that's in Numbers 5. Did I say Deuteronomy? I meant Numbers 11 through 29.
Okay, so I have a question.
Sure.
What about the guy?
That's what I was
Well-
sitting here thinking, when are they not ever dealt
What
with?
happened to the dude?
It's always the women.
Well, I don't have a verse on that one.
Probably not there.
Is it chapter 11 of Numbers?
No, Numbers 5,
5, okay.
Adultery tale.
5:11. Now, I can explain it. You can probably read it, but at any rate, but the immune system, all those germs and bugs and everything and poison in that dirty dirt, if she's not guilty, her immune system would shut it down. If she is guilty, she would develop some kind of bad disease as a result of drinking all that poison, all that bad disease. Are anybody familiar with that passage?
What?
I said, is anybody familiar? Have you ever heard of that passage before? Numbers,
Probably
Numbers
read it. I probably read it, but it wouldn't stand out in my mind for sure.
well, Mary Esther, Connie, you've read enough to know I'm telling the truth, more or less.
What it says, yeah.
That's what it says. So at any rate, but what we're getting at is the relationship between the mind and the body. Now you move over into Corinthians, Paul said, you need to take the Lord's Supper rightly, examining yourself. Those that have not examined themselves, many of you are weak and sickly, and some have even died because you're taking the Lord's Supper without proper motives and without it proper examining yourself. And so, again, you see the relationship between your mind, your body, your spirit, it's all interconnected. So, I know that was a long way around an introduction, but the other thing is, that's how we got the lie detector. All those wires are hooked up to you. And, if you're lying or not telling the truth, it will show up on the little wiggly lines on the lie detector that you are falsifying something. So what we're getting at is that there is the relationship between your mind and your body, and that's visible. And you probably all read things about how to detect somebody telling the truth or not telling the truth, how their eyes move and how they look and their telltales and all that kind of stuff. Especially you card game players, you can look at somebody and if they got a good hand, they say, oh, great, or if they get real sad, they got a bad hand. So it just naturally.
They say, I don't have anything you do. We play cards on Tuesday.
Yeah, I knew that. So there's a relationship between the body, soul, and spirit. And one of the things reason I'm doing this is to develop mental health. I don't know when the last time, other than the last couple of times here, that I've heard a message in church on mental health. How to develop mental health. How do we have mental health? It's so important to have mental health, to have a positive attitude, to have something that will promote spiritual health. Because physical health, spiritual health, they're very closely connected with one another. And that's been proven in science over and over again. Now, the problem we've got right now with medicine, as best I can tell, and I don't totally remember the name of this particular line of medicine, but a lot of doctors coming out of medical school now, they practice a type of medicine that your body is like a car. You plug in that little thing in the car, the computer, and it'll tell you what's wrong with it, and you go change it. They get a list of symptoms, and they say this pill will solve your problem. Or you need to take this pill, this pill, this pill, and it'll solve your problems. They treat the body like it's a thing, that all it is just physically, it's just pure body. And you just get the right combination of drugs, and you'll be totally cured. Well, I've been reading some other things, and most of you know this, that you cannot solve a diet problem with a pill. What we eat and how we live also contributes to our physical problems. Now that's where I go back to what I was dealing with a couple of weeks ago on stress. If we could get rid of stress, in our lives, how much healthier would we be if we could get rid of stress? Now, so far, the only person that I've heard in here that doesn't have any stress is Judy.
Oh, man.
Now, and she gave a good speech on stress a couple of weeks ago when Steve asked her, how do you handle stress? But I think we all have stress. Now, my question is, we know what happens when we see something and we have stress. And I talked about adrenaline. Now, this was the interesting thing that when I started studying stress in more detail several months ago, is that the first thing that happens, say you see somebody with a fire, you see a house fire, you see somebody trapped in a car. We've all seen people go out there that normally couldn't do it. They can pick up a car, turn it over, get the person out from underneath of it. Well, the adrenaline gland has stored adrenaline, and it's ready right then on the spot. I mean, it just throws energy all over the body, right on the spot. Now, if the stress stays there, and this is the important thing that I really learned, is that if it stays, there's a difference between what they call it temporary stress and chronic stress. Chronic stress is when it stays day after day after day after day, year after year after year. That's chronic stress. Now, chronic stress will kill you if you don't get that under control. Because what happens is, and like I said, I'm not a doctor, so y'all can go look at this all you want to and verify it. But after 10 minutes, what the scientists say, after 10 minutes, that adrenaline, if it's not settled, the next one that comes in is what Merle said a while ago, cortisol jumps in. And cortisol controls 4 areas. Does anybody, I've done it twice, does anybody remember what those 4 areas are?
Besides Merrill.
One is your thinking. It goes, and I'm not going to mention the names of these parts of the brain. That's a mistake I made last time. But it messes with your thinking ability. And a person gets to a point that, what am I going to do? 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 I'm panic mode. I don't know what to do. Because you lose control of your thinking. The second thing that it does, it controls messes with the part of the brain that deals with your memory. You forget everything that's ever been good to happen to you, and you forget, in my thinking, what I'm doing now, you forget all the promises of God. I'm a disaster. There's no hope for me right now. It's all gone. The next thing that cortisol messes with is, and I hope you remember this one, is serotonin. Now, that is your depression area. And that's where you need to take, and I don't know the names of these drugs, but you need to take some kind of antidepressant because the cortisol knocks out the serotonin. You don't produce that anymore. And I talked with a psychiatrist years ago at one of our clinics, and she said that if you experience trauma, stress so great that your brain will shut down producing serotonin. You'll shut it down. And so you will be depressed. And she said what we do is we'll give an antidepressant to try to kickstart that part of the brain to produce serotonin. It produces it on its own. So what happens is you start feeling good. You start feeling better. That's how I feel good. And so what the brain does then, it says, hey, this person wants to feel good, so we'll start producing serotonin again. Now, if your brain says, I want to feel bad, your brain says, hey, this person wants to feel bad, so we'll shut down serotonin. And so the brain controls that kind of stuff. Now, I knew that 25, 30 years ago, but I didn't know that it was the cortisol that caused it. And then the other part of the brain that gets shut down is your oxytocin. Now that's a good word to learn. Now, more of my reading in this says that the oxytocin is nicknamed the cuddle hormone. Now, I thought that was so strange.
Self-pity?
Sir?
Self-pity?
No, it's you feel alone. Maybe self-pity in there, but you feel alone. You're all of a sudden you're all by yourself, and you have nobody. And it's the I couldn't understand it for a long time until I studied this. Why some people just like to get a hug, you know?
Okay.
Because
We're Southerners, that's what we do.
yeah.
That's it.
And what I read, it says a hug produces oxytocin, and so
You need 5 hugs a day to maintain mental health.
Yep.
Is what they said.
But I didn't know why until I studied it. Now maybe y'all think, well, I want to study the Bible. I don't want to study this kind of stuff. But to me, the body and the mind and the spirit are all interconnected together. And another important thing is physical exercise. Physical exercise will help you solve the problem of fatty liver. Do I know? And so one of the reasons that I started looking into this even more detail is that Dick, that comes here from time to time, his sister-in-law died a few months ago of non-alcoholic fatty liver. And when the liver shuts down, everything else is pretty shut down. I mean, it's kind of over with, unless you can get a liver transplant. But it's epidemic right now. They estimated that 40% of people in the country have a fatty liver.
Is there any way that you could go to a doctor and have something done to let you know if you have a fatty liver?
They can test for it
I would like to know.
with
Your blood work would
You
tell.
might wanna
Yeah,
not know.
your blood work will tell you.
Yeah, the blood work, and I didn't. You know, they give you this panel. That's an excellent question, because I was worried about it too. You know, 40% of them. Where do I fit in all this mess? And so there's a thing called I think it's ALT or AST, something along that line, that measures your your liver. It's a liver enzyme. Merle may be up on it more than I am, but at any rate, so this one doctor was saying when I was in medical school, the cutoff was 25. So many people have fatty liver that they moved it to 50. So if you've got less than 50 in this particular item, you're in good shape. Well, I opened my card back up, my panel back up that I got a few months ago, and I said, well, I was sitting there shaking, looking at it. And it was 24. And so another lady that I was talking to said her ALT or AST, whatever that thing is, hers was sitting at 800.
Oh, my Lord.
Wow.
And so 800 to 200. Anyway, it was way on up there. So I felt pretty good about what I had. The only thing I got to maintain it. And so it's all interconnected. Everything is all interconnected in there with, have you heard that fella advertise on TV, insulin resistance? It took me two to 3 years to figure out what that was. He said, if you've got this, you're in bad shape. I said, well, do I have it? And I could not figure out what it was for the longest. But I'm not going to explain. Y'all can look at it on the internet if you want to know what it is. I mean, that's not, is outside of the realm of this. It's important. It's extremely important. Every other metabolic disease that you can have is connected to that. And it controls the majority of everything that you've got sick with. But at any rate, so I've got to get to the solution to all this. So my question is, how are you going to control your stress? How do you control it? How do you bring it under control, knowing all this? Well, one of the things is a sound mind. Now, 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Now that's what I'm after, a sound mind. How do we get a sound mind? Now, piggybacking on something that Merle said, meditation. Now there's a verse that says, be still and know that I am God. Now the other thing Jesus said in the last days, men's hearts are going to explode looking at the things that are coming on the earth in the last days. Now you don't necessarily need to be in the last days to worry about the things that are coming. 5 minutes of the news will put you in distress if you're not careful.
Yes, right.
But to be still and know that I am God. Who's in control? You or God? Now once you get that decision made, that God is in control, somehow or another it settles all the cortisone down. Because and this is my terminology, not scientific, not metabolic, but cortisol comes on pushing out all kinds of energy, saying, we're going to solve this. You're going to solve this. It's all up to you. It's all up to you and me and cortisol. We're going to get this thing done. And you just tell cortisol, hey, back off a little bit, okay? It's not up to me. I'm not the one in control of this situation. You can't pump enough insulin in me to make this thing go away. You can't control my memory. I remember all the promises of God. I'm going to be joyful because remember the Bible says the joy of the Lord is what?
Strength.
Your strength. And the joy of the Lord makes your bones strong. Now what is made in the bones? The red blood cells are made in the bones. And you don't have red blood cells, you're in trouble. And so healthy red blood cells are made in the bone. So it's amazing how the Bible is so interconnected with our spiritual health, obviously, and our mental health and our physical health. It's all connected. Everything is connected. And how many times did God tell us, don't fear? And I'm giving you peace. Some person counted, there's over 365 times in the Bible where the Bible says, don't fear. Now, what happens if you fear? If we don't obey that command of not fearing? Now, you got to meditate on why we don't fear. Matthew chapter 6 says, look at the birds, they're not worried about eating. Look at the flowers of the field, they're not worried about what they're going to put on. So don't you worry about it either. So, so don't worry. God keeps telling us not to worry. Now, if you do worry, to me, there is a built-in, I'll use another word here, wrath of God, of disobedience. If we do fear, if we don't learn to control the fear, there is a built-in judgment that comes to pass in our bodies. That health goes down the drain. That we're not happy. We don't produce the health that we need. So fear and health are opposite. They don't go together. Now, one other thing, we know the story of the wise man and the foolish person. One fella built a house on a rock, one fella built a house on the sand. There's gonna be wind coming, there's gonna be rain blowing, and it's gonna come down. We're not gonna avoid these problems. So we need to build our lives on the Word of God, to have a sound mind, sound spirit, sound spiritual. That's the, this will be the last time I deal with cortisol, by the way. But I had a hard time figuring out how to explain it, and how to deal with it. But I would like for you to come up with your own plan in the morning, hopefully, that you stop and think, Lord, I don't know what's coming this day, but you know what's coming, and you've already got it figured out. It's not for me and a whole boatload of cortisol is gonna figure it out. You're gonna figure this out, and I don't have to worry about getting it all figured out. Sufficient is every day the evil that's out there, and everything's gonna work together for good. David said it was good for me to be chastised, even if God decides to chastise you a little bit and take you out behind the woodshed for a little bit. That's not bad. David said it was good for me to have that happen to me. So whether it's good or bad, it's going to work out for your good. And so be happy about it. Now, next week, I was telling Jonathan a minute ago, I'm going to leave Thessalonians for just a minute. Not that, I got tired of it, but I want to do something a little different. I'm going to talk just a touch about Melchizedek, but I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to need to move the couch, and I'm going to hang a chart on the wall that deals with how long people lived back then. One of the things I discovered recently, sometime back, is that Sarah died the same time as Seth died. They both died about the same time. So it's amazing how many people were overlapped. How long Adam and Eve lived with Methuselah. I mean, they spent a couple of, I better not say right now, but I know it's been well more than 100 years. So can you imagine all the conversation that Adam and Eve had with some of the descendants down the line? So all that's the reason I think they lived so long, is to pass down the oral history, because so many people overlap. So the excellent chart, if you want to look at it, there's all kinds of charts on the internet, YouTube, of charts of how long did people live, and you can come a little bit more prepared if you look at some of these old charts on the internet. They're fascinating how these things all overlapped. How many? Because Seth lived 400. He lived several hundred years after he got off the boat, and enough time for Abraham to be born and live together with some of the people that got off the ark.
And Noah was very important too, between Adam and Noah, because Methuselah was the connection.
Yeah, he lived back then too. It's all interconnected. I'll let you explain some of it if you want to.
No.
I just help. I enjoy when people already know something. But it's fascinating to see how long these people lived and how they overlapped each other.
I have a question. Are these actual years in the way we think of years?
I think so.
So it's really, if they lived, it says 100 years, it's really the 100 that we think of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, there's others may not disagree with that, but they can be wrong too.
You know, it makes you think though, if Methuselah is like 969, was he old from 70 to 969, or was he still fairly young when he was 350? Or did he have white hair from the last 800 years?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to know. You gotta be pretty wired to live 900 something years.
Put that on your list of questions.
Social Security be broke for those people.
It's broken.
What is your inkling of what some of the things that they, of course I know it's just crazy, but, some of the conversation, just the fact that they could pass on the goodness of God and things that he's done for them and.
Well, the one thing that I think happened is that the accuracy of what they said, the accuracy of what's in the book of Genesis can be, I don't say verified, but it can be, have more confidence in it because they kept saying the same thing over and over and over again. The other thing, there's a verse, and I'll find it between now and next week. It says, God said, I told you how to plant wheat, barley, and the other crops. I told you how to do all this. So I'm sitting there thinking, when did he tell him how to do all that? That had to be in the garden. Hey, Adam, this is how you're going to take care of this. This is how you plant this. This is how you process this food. So they had to know how to do all that. That's one thing that I think was going on back then. Because when I read that verse, he says, I told you how to do all that. I told you how to do agriculture. I told you how to do that. And then up until the time of the flood, there was as you know, there was a canopy of water above the earth. And so the climate was totally different. So that would have enabled them to live that long. And then the gene pool had not been corrupted very much. And they could marry cousins and not have the problem because the gene pool's connected. You're not still recording, are you? Okay.
I can cut it off then.
No. The other thing is because there's so many people on the earth. My wife and I were talking about this the other day, and because I'm going over it with the grandkids, getting them to learn the story of the temptation and fall. And I haven't been able, they're not old enough to understand what it means to pain in childbirth. But the big question is, did they have children before the fall? Where did, the old story about Cain? And Sharon said, well, it just says there'd be more pain, not less pain. There wasn't pain. And Sharon said, well, if they lived several hundred years, no pain in childbirth, they could probably have 100 kids, your mind just starts running off in wild directions all over the place.
That must be like you.
What's that?
That one must be like you.
Well, he threw me the other day, because his birthday's coming up in a couple of months. And he said, you know what I want for my birthday? And I said, well, it's still 2 months away. He said, I want a YouTube channel. And I said, you want a YouTube channel? What do you want to do with that? He said, yeah, I want to make some money. So, I don't know about that. I never crossed my mind.
People have to watch it to make money, just let them know that.
What now?
People have to watch it for it to make money.
Yeah. Well, you'll fail a dozen times before you start doing it anyway, so, but he's got a cousin, we got a friend in Houston that does Lego, and he puts Lego movies on, and he's about 15, 16, 17 years old, and he makes about $15,000-$20,000 a year making Lego and putting them on YouTube. And so, somehow or another, he heard about that. So that's what he wants to do.
I read somewhere, and I forgot where I read it, that Methuselah was still around when the flood came.
Yeah.
Did he choose not to get on the ark, or was that God's will? I'm just curious.
I don't know, he died the year of the flood.
Okay. He could have died right before it.
Yeah.
You ever seen that weird movie with Russell Crowe and his version of with Noah?
Oh,
That is a bizarre movie. It's interesting to watch. They had those creatures helping build the ark. I forgot, they were made of stone or something. They were like fallen angels. They put all that stuff in to make the movie really dramatic. You can see people desperately trying to get on that boat. I'm sure it happened even in Noah's time. People were trying to hang on the ark. God took them all.
Yeah, got a lot of positive comments.
Well, the question I have, you know, God said he's gonna make a way for everybody to be saved that wants to be saved. Now, in my thinking, there wasn't enough room on that boat for everybody. So I think what it was, God said, this is what you're gonna have to do. You're gonna have to go build your own boat. And then you'll be saved.
It'd be tough to do when you're 900 years old.
Yeah. Okay, well, my next question was, what is, you don't have to answer this today, but you need to come up with it. What is gonna be your plan to overcome these 4 areas? What is your plan to overcome these 4 areas when you get stress or when you have trauma? Or drama? Everybody has drama in their family, most people do. What are you gonna do? What is your plan for overcoming these 4 areas? What verses are you gonna snap in immediately when you feel all alone, when you feel down, when you've got to remember the good things of God, and when you've got to come up with a plan? When you get muddled, how do you overcome being muddled and not knowing what to do? You have an immediate, just, you know, you go to the fire department comes up, tell you, you need to have an emergency plan to get out of your house. You gotta have a plan to get out, to solve your problem. So what is your plan to overcome these 4 areas that will come? They will come. If you don't solve it quick, cortisol is gonna jump in and take over and gonna knock all 4 of those areas out.
Gonna have to take up yoga.
Yeah. Well, no.
That's not really that far off, because what goes on in yoga is nothing in the world but meditation. That's what it's based on, relieving stress.
Feeling your body.
I took a yoga class in college, and it actually was good for you, but it is real stress relieving, and that's what they're after. If you start thinking that way while you're praying, you'll find yourself blending with what's around you a whole lot better.
Well, we can go on and on and on about this because there's a mountain of material written from a Christian point of view on how to overcome stress. But you got to do it. Or it's the old statement, if you don't control stress, stress will control you. Father, thank you for our time together. And Lord, just ask you that you would help us to see the practicality of your word. And we thank you for all the modern insights that we're getting today that the world never knew years and years ago about how the body works. It was a mystery to them, but we know now more and more of how our bodies work and how it is in such harmony with your word. And help us to live by faith. Be with the people that we've mentioned in prayer today, and may we have a sound mind, sound spirit, sound body, healthy in every one of the areas. For we pray in Christ's name, amen.